Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, here with you today. Much love going out to all the beautiful empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in today on a really intense question, and that is, does a psychopath feel? Does a psychopath have feelings? How can they do this? And, in other words, the degree of deception, the degree of confusion, the degree of betrayal. What are they feeling? So I think there's a lot of curiosity that stems from people who have been victimized by these types. So I found a really great article here on HuffPost written by a Dr. Paul Matuzzi. Matuzzi. Okay, let's just Mattiuzzi. Okay, you get the drift. He is a licensed psychologist, criminal forensic expert, workplace and health psychology consultant. So he has a really great article, I think, that speaks to this effect and why does kind of a psychopath engage in this, what is known as hyper arousal. These individuals, they have a very strong need to not feel bored. In other words, they're very uncomfortable if they feel bored or understimulated. The psychopath, they fail to empathize and therefore are prone to victimize. They fail to empathize and are therefore prone to victimize. So we really need to understand that statement, to look at how emotions, because they're not really felt to the intensity, in fact, what he calls is hypo reactive, meaning under-reactive, because these individuals don't feel feelings the same way that, quote unquote, most of society does, that they need to do things to help them to feel something, to feel alive in some way, to get their thrills on, to get their yayas out. So they see other people doing things, they obviously have to do things too. So because they fail to empathize, they're therefore prone to victimize. So think about that statement as we discuss this really interesting article. And of course, empathy refers to the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. So, that is what empathy is, but they're missing that. And also, there's another great comment here on this article, so I'm just going to jot this down. Usually I just am giving you kind of a synopsis, but it's really interesting. There's a book called The Psychopathic Mind by Dr. Meloy, Meloy, and he states in his book, The Psychopathic Mind, the science unequivocally supports the hypothesis that psychopathic individuals, those with antisocial personality disorder, are autonomically hyporeactive. Autonomically hyporeactive. So I think this is a good key to, help you to understand, in a situation where you have been hyper aroused by someone who is psychopathic. In other words, their biology is such that they don't experience emotions as intensely as others. In other words, so it's thought that they're not really inhibited by like fear, guilt, anxiety, self-doubt, or remorse. So those feeling states that most people enter into, they don't have a lot of that going on. They're hypo-reactive, which meaning under-reactive. They don't have a response. They're not feeling it. They're not feeling the fear. They're not feeling the guilt. They're not feeling remorse. There's something else that they're feeling. Usually, they're more rage or anger or envy or jealousy. So they can be aroused by those things and want to have and do things that are based on those sort of emotional states. We'll see here in just a moment. And Malloy observed basically that in situations where an emotional reaction would be expected, from someone who's normal, socialized, they might feel little or nothing. But at the same time, they can display intense, unmodulated affect that is dramatized by its unpredictability. Wow, let's read that one more time. But at the same time, they can display intense, unmodulated which means seemingly uncontrolled. Affect, which is your emotions. It's like how your affect is how your emotions are displayed in a social situation that is dramatized by its unpredictability. So this is the charm. In other words, they will oftentimes have this overreaction, this bigger than life. I've equated it once again to like the Seinfeld show. If you've ever seen it, I know we have a lot of international viewers, but if you watch Seinfeld, you've probably even heard of it internationally. But Kramer is this guy with this curly hair, it's like all up, and he always just comes like sliding through the door. He's got this big entrance. So that's kind of like the big kind of overemphasized moves and reactions that a psychopath will make. And it's oftentimes very unpredictable. So that's why people are like glued to them, because they're like, whoa, this person is like, what are they going to do next? It's like a psychopath will, as I've heard, describe themselves like a train wreck. In other words, you don't want, you can't take your eyes off the train wreck. You have to see what happens. There's that feeling of you're all in. They've got you hook, line, and sinker. If you've seen something like that, you obviously want to see what happens. If you see a train all of a sudden ready to spill over, I mean, you're gonna stop the car, and you're probably gonna. That's what it's like. And it's readily observed that psychopaths experience such feelings as anger, resentment, envy, and jealousy. I.e., here we go, those primal emotions that are all about, the win, the conquer, the prey, the predator and the prey. So very predatory in nature. And so furthermore, he says it's readily observed in that psychopaths experience feelings of anger, resentment, envy, and jealousy, and that narcissism is a core element of the sociopathic character traits. It can produce powerful feelings of like self-righteousness and entitlement. And so, oftentimes, for example, he gives an example of like a child custody case. They might be very agitated, not because they want the children to raise them, but just for the sheer fact that they can win. They just want to be the conqueror. They want to be the predator, and they want to dominate. They want to make others as their prey. And this is no laughing matter. Okay, this ain't funny. This can become very, very serious. So, it's important that I think there's another point that he makes here is that to achieve their predatory ends, they seek to evoke feelings of shame, frustration, terror, or fear. And so, and in other words, they can sense the emotional vulnerabilities of somebody. And they get to feel, in other words, they can feel and sense and know who can be intimidated, who can be twisted, who can be provoked, or who can be incited. So in other words, they kind of know who they can get their finger wrapped around. And they will often seek to evoke feelings of shame, frustration, terror, or fear. And in my viewpoint, oftentimes they will do that, but combined with sexual arousal, combined with some sort of, cementing of the relationship as this wonderful thing. So, in other words, taking people to a point where they normally would be very uncomfortable and want to protect themselves, but then be aroused by a desire for more of that which is uncomfortable. Very, very odd. Okay. And they, as predators, they are aroused by the hunt and the suffering of their prey. As predators, they are aroused by the hunt and the suffering of their prey. So they know when they're stringing you along, okay? It just causes them to feel something, okay? So they're aroused by stringing you along, even if it's, we're talking of marriage, we're talking of having a family, we're talking about business goals, it's all a very deliberate and calculated situation. I mean, you must understand that. You must understand it's predetermined, pre-calculated, what they're going to do. they're very many steps ahead of you. And so they obtain pleasure in seeing others shamed and find gratification in an opponent's misery. He furthermore states it's thought that because they are emotionally hyporeactive, if you've ever seen hyporeactive, in other words, once again, I've used the example in previous videos, it's like when someone's dog is put to sleep, most people would be like freaking out. They might just not really feel anything. Like, why would you do that? Is their reaction rather than, tears and crying and calling them, how could you slay, you're a slayer, how could you slay my dog? Like, usually people would have this fit, a psychopath is just like, why would you do that? They just don't react. It's really, really strange when you observe it. And it's very scary, but that can also lead to oftentimes to a lot of people's fascination with them and like, wow, you're so cool, calm, and collected. You're not upset by this. This is something wrong here. Okay, if you've felt that more than one occasion, you might want to examine the relationship. And it is, he furthermore states, they may obtain pleasure in seeing others shamed and may find gratification in another opponent's misery, which most people want to avoid, right? I mean, so very strange. And it's thought that because they are emotionally hyporeactive, they seek excitement and stimulation. It takes more for them to feel alive, and so it makes sense that they would feed off the emotions of others. So, I think that state, the hyporeactive state, is very important for you to understand when you're trying to identify this, and that they're trying to feel out some sort of weakness out of you to get you into a space of weakness, and that they do take some sort of gratification or pleasure out of this. In this hyporeactive sense, I think is a great word that this contributor has provided, Dr. Mattiuzzi, is that's a great term. And so you can then understand that because of the study and the science, they're autonomically hyporeactive. So it's how they're wired. Their anatomy is this way. And so a psychopath, though, they do know this about themselves, that they're different. And so many of them, they look at that and will use this in different manners. In other words, some of them will use it to get ahead in life and not really, hurt too many people. Some of them will use it to take great advantage of others. In other words, to use it in business, to use it in finances. I mean, there's no question that there are certain industries that attract a ton of these types, particularly in the finance and music and arts, the movies, movie stars, actors, actresses. I mean, it's just replete with these types, as well as oftentimes, large, C-level, C-suite executives. You can check this out. Thomas Sheridan, Puzzling People. He also speaks about this as well. He is a writer, I think, out of Ireland. Thomas Sheridan. You can also check him out here on YouTube. He has some interesting videos as well. In his book, Puzzling People, The Labyrinth of the Psychopath, is an excellent, heavy read. But he will help to give you some validation. His work is very terse. It's got a lot of words. So sometimes it's difficult to relate or kind of like extrapolate or pull out like what you're trying to find. But the situation is that if you have been hyper aroused by this individual who's hyper arousing you, meaning they've hyper stimulated you, gotten you into where it's disrupted your sleep, oftentimes through the door of sexuality, just getting you just so aroused that it never really is a relief. Let's just call it that. And then it's also combined with a lack of feeling for you, which means, a psychopath will express themselves as asexual, so not really interested in sex. but they will engage in a ton of sexual activity because it makes them feel like they're feeling something or doing something. That's where they get their gratification. It's not because there's any connection or relationship or wanting, the good life on down the road and let's work towards this and like, oh my God, it's you and me that are just having a blast against the world. They might tell you this, but they can lie and you can never detect it. In fact, there's all sorts of examples of psychopaths being able to pass lie detector tests. Their anatomy doesn't, even though they're lying, their anatomy does not reveal so. So you can imagine how difficult it is to identify this and to know what you're going through, to know, why this hyperarousal is. Some people think it's just, me caring about the individual or like, I trust this individual or this is sent to me from God above or, whatever explanation you're giving about this person. Yet you're fitting information into the contrary. In other words, cracks start to come in the mask, and you begin to learn what you're dealing with. The hyper arousal is when oftentimes you feel that that they're just trying to get you, even through the words that they say, trying to twist, trying to get that look from you that keeps you off of your game, essentially. So there's going to be some result or some effect that they are looking that's oftentimes going to be not in your best interest. Remember the term intraspecies predator, Dr. Robert Hare? They are trying to take you as a prey for some reason. So you can imagine that is not a positive relationship at all. It's something to, whether you've gotten to the point where you can't trust yourself, you don't know if this person is this, look at the effect of hyperarousal on you. Is this person, crossing too many boundaries where they have you agitated, feeling paranoid, looking at things differently, not valuing what you have, not valuing who you are, not valuing what you usually value. In other words, what's most important to you? And look at what might be most important to you, and then being able to really get to that and being rigorously honest and seeing how they are detracting you from that truthfully so that you no longer identify it. But also it can be like the double entendre, basically, where you think, but it's not really helping you. In other words, it's just a double whammy no. In other words, if you value, let's just say you value nature, and then somehow that closeness that you feel, they will make you feel like you're getting closer, but you're really getting farther, so they'll make you to feel, make it appear as if you're getting closer to your values, but they're really pulling you away. So you have to be careful for that. It's a very insidious situation, the hyperarousal, that leads you to be very far away from a closeness to your values, a closeness with your heart, a closeness with your best decisions, thinking clearly, being able to feel okay in who you are and what you are, and that is enough, and that is, that's where the juice is. It's not all about them. That you have within you all that capacity to be unlocked. You don't need this person to get there or to be that. The hyperarousal is something to really look at. Where have your boundaries been violated? Where have your standards been violated? Be rigorously honest no matter how difficult it is, because it's an effect of them. They're very easily bored. This is on the Hare checklist. They need to feel something, so they're always got to be, on these different situations. That's why they have the ability to have a number of different quote unquote romantic partners, jobs, different incompatible interests, that don't seem compatible. It's just And oftentimes it can be very in the moment and very big, and then it seems like they're reacting. They're just trying to get themselves to feel something. So, be very careful of the web that you get caught in. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today, and I hope these videos do help you to decompress, de-stress, and come to some terms and actual, a strategy for yourself, an actual concrete exit strategy, and getting some of your senses really grounded. Peace out.